Welcome back to another reading and correcting of A Wasteful Death. With me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. Today we are doing Chapter 5. Trembor wiped as much of the blood as he could off his hands before hitting the answer button. On voice mode only. It wasn't presentable to be on screen. Trembor speaking. There was a moment of silence. It's Jaxka. There was a hesitation before he continued. Am I interrupting something? Somewhat. We're finishing breakfast. Packing what's left for processing. We can call you back once we've cleaned up. Please do. I'd rather not see blood on anyone who's still alive. Lion chuckled. All right, it shouldn't be long. He shut the receiver off and joined Marlot in the adjoining room. Like him, the wolf was naked and covered in blood. He was putting the remaining chunks of their meat in the center of the tarp that covered most of the floor. So much for licking you clean, said, disappointment coloring the words. He grabbed the haunch and tossed it among the other parts. That was Jaxka. Eating on the floor, ripping flesh off bodies with teeth and claws, always made him feel primal. He loved the feeling, and if he could, he would eat this way all the time. Unfortunately, it did get messy and wasn't appropriate in public. He was resigned to eating processed meat in a nice, civilized way like everyone else. But once in a while, he had to give in to his need to bury his muzzle in the prey and feel the blood drip over him. When he felt that way, he didn't care how long it took to clean up after. He was lucky that Marlot also enjoyed a more primal form of eating. Marlot took in the lion's bloodstained golden fur and licked his chop. Another hunger built in him, one that filled him with a need just as primal as the desire to devour unprocessed prey. His body reacted, and he stood, panting. Took a step toward the lion, noticed the door they'd left open. Their desk, the communication unit, and the other door behind which Elahan worked. He tried to hold on to the passion, but it vanished. He mouthed an apology before looking away, his ears folded back. He knelt and went back to wrapping the meat, making sure the package was properly sealed. Marlot handed it to Trembor without looking up. After putting the package in the cooler, or placed a gentle hand on the wolf's shoulder and drew him to the shower. Under the warm water, Marlot thought it was ironic that he'd been shown such an uncivilized way to eat once he entered what he'd considered civilization while growing up in a small town. He felt Trembor's hand on his back and his muscled body pressed against him. Marlot closed his eyes in contentment, and he felt the lion lick his neck. He could stay like this all day. You taste like breakfast, let Trembor whisper. Maybe I should have you for lunch. Marlot smiled at the thought of this brought up, and his body started to react, but then he remembered Elahan, waiting behind a door that might not be locked. His tail went between his legs. Why did he have to feel it like this? Trembor kissed the back of his neck and released him. He reached over their head to stop the flow of water before picking up the bottle of fur wash and applying a generous portion on Marlot's back. His touch was gentle, but all business. He lathered the wolf's fur. Marlot was both relieved at the lack of affection and angry at himself for letting his past influence him so strongly. By the time Trembor was done lathering him, Marlot was calming, having pushed the anger to the back of his mind. He'd deal with it. Marlot then lathered Trembor, and they rinsed off. By the time they were dry and dressed, more than an hour had passed. We need more hours in the day, Trembor stated, so we can do this more often. Marlot shook his head. We'd go broke doing this every day. It would be worthwhile. The lion grinned and dialed Jaxka. A moment later, a red frog appeared on the screen. Morning. I take it breakfast was good. It was delicious. Trembor sent the image, the small screen to the area. Trembor sent the image from the small screen to the area above their desk, where Jaxka's head looked a little larger than normal. Jessica shook his head in amusement. I'll never understand why you enjoy eating in such a sloppy manner. It's a predator thing. Marlot moved in the camera's view. We don't expect you to understand. I take it you've never had someone lick you clean after a meal. Or stared at his partner, ears erect in surprise. Very funny, Frog said with a dry laugh. No, I've never been licked. How about we proceed? Marlot inserted the data slate, and their computers took a moment to sync with Jaxka. The frog then brought up multiple thumbnails on each side of the image. He touched 4 of them, and they tiled over his face. As you can see from the x-ray, her neck was broken. The break wasn't fatal, but it obstructed her airways. She suffocated. Nodded. Explained how she was found. She was trying to reach her pad to call for help. Were you able to determine if it was broken on purpose? Becca waved the image off and brought 2 other from the selection. They showed the body's neck, the fur had been shaved off, and the skin showed sign of bruising. You can tell from the shape of the bruises that someone had their hands around her neck at some point before she died. While that might not be enough to say it was done on purpose, he said as he replaced the image with 2 others, her wrist also shaved, these bruises indicate she was also held down. From what I see, he broke her neck, then held her down while she suffocated. He moved the image away and became visible again. Or looked at him. You were able to determine the killer, a male killed her? Jackson brought up another smaller picture. All it could make out her vagina, bruised and bloodied. He raped her, probably while she was dying. The person who did this is one sick individual. Or really angry, or offered. Whatever the reason, I hope you find him, because he didn't kill 1 person, he killed 2. She was pregnant. Or was stunned. There hadn't been any evidence of a pregnancy. How far along was she? He asked, once he regained his voice. Jessica eyed them for a moment. Best I can determine, 2 months. Glared at the lion before he could say anything. Don't you dare bring up that 3-month crap. A child's a child from the moment it's conceived. I know that. Trembor's voice was equal part anger and exasperation. But, Bruce said in a calm tone, the law doesn't recognize a cub's existence until the 3rd month after conception. So we can't add cub predation to the charges. Jessica and Trembor were both fuming. Punishment for predation of a cub was to be eaten alive by the family, or appointed representative. For Aiden's death, the male would have to pay the tax. If he couldn't, he'd be assigned to a work detail until the value had been paid off. Work details were certainly rough, but it didn't bring the satisfaction a kill would. He closed his eyes and took a few breaths. What can you tell us about the cub? Jack Scott took a little longer to calm down. It's mixed breed. It's too early in the pregnancy to tell what species the father was, but it looked properly formed, so his genus is likely close to hers. Nodded. So probably another feline? Would the father be canid? Marlot asked. Actually thought it over. It isn't likely, but it's possible. Feline-canine mixes have one of the higher survival rate. The only way to be sure who the father is to compare DNA. Is there any indication the father is the killer? Marlot asked after a moment's silence. The question earned him a horrified look from Trembor, and the lion sat down. Jekka shook his head, his tone clinical. He used a condom, so he didn't leave anything inside her. Also, the only fur on the body was hers, so nothing to get DNA from. Marlot nodded. Anything else? No, that's the gist of it. The slate has a detailed report. Okay, thanks. We'll go through the enforcer report. If they found anything we need you to look at, we'll let you know. The frog nodded. The body will be here until you're done with the investigation. Marlot ended the call. Are you going to be okay? Asked the lion. Trembor grimaced and looked like he might throw up. I think breakfast was a bad idea. Marlot took his hand in both of his and crouched next to him. Just relax. Of something else. Nuzzled the lion's neck and nipped at it gently. Trembor's breathing slowed and the tension slowly left his body. Thank you. Marlot smiled and the lion kissed him. The kiss lasted longer than either intended, and they were breathless when they finally separated. Marlot stood and straightened his shirt in a futile attempt to cover the state the kiss left him. Yes, well, I think we should get back to work now. He sat down on the side of his desk. On his side of the desk. Trevor chuckled sheepishly. Happy he didn't have to stand. He looked at the slate with the enforcer report, slotted it into the computer, and went through them. The force report reiterated what he'd learned from the officer on the scene about Hayden's secretary. He found the body. The next one was the initial inspection of the house, not apparently missing or had been added to the home. The lock's records showed that they had been active for 3 days before the enforcer overrode them. The backdoor lock had been deactivated, then reactivated 53 minutes later. Marl, does Jessica give a time of death on his report? Marlowe quickly scanned the text before him. Not precise time. His estimate puts it in the late afternoon on. He checked the day. On the last day, Aiden was working. Fits with her being. On the last day, Aiden was working. Fits with her being dressed for work. We're nodded. It also matches the lock records. So she let whoever killed her in, and then, a little less than an hour later, he leaves, locking up behind him. She was either dead by then or died soon after. Frowned and went back to the initial report. Okay, that's weird. How does he spend that much time in the house, rape her, and manage not to shed a single hair? By being prepared, I think. Glanced to the side of his screen to look at the lion. But that raises the question of why she would let someone in a shed-proof suit in. Those things aren't exactly discreet, and why leave the body lying there after taking that kind of precaution? Without a body, it's just a missing person case. The longer it takes to find it, the more it deteriorates, and the harder it becomes to make the identification, let alone track down the killer. The 6 bodies in our freezers are proof of that. Which reminds me, pointed to the last light on the desk, we have a tip on the Shehavan body. We'll want to look into it when we have the time. We're nodded. Okay. So we're agreed this isn't the work of a paid hunter. There weren't many, but some people were willing to hunt for others. They tended to be employed by those rich people. Extravagant lifestyle meant they were in no shape to do their own hunting. Such hunters were usually not quite sane. They didn't kill to feed themselves. All they wanted was the hunt and the kill. No, this feels more like someone lashing out in anger, breaking her neck, watching her suffocate, and raping her, probably while she was dying. He wanted her to suffer like she made him suffer. So we're looking for a spurned lover. The file only lists 2 current lovers, Alcyon Sharptooth, her contracted lover, and Telema Shorttail. That's the male from the house. He's a student. I am pretty sure he isn't our killer. Why? He's been to the house before, so the enforcer wouldn't have noted his fur as being out of place. You were on top of him. You smelled him. But he was completely devastated by seeing her dead. You can't fake that. You can't fake emotions. That's why they do plays downwind of the audience. If we got scent of the actors, we never buy into the act. Outside. And why use a condom with someone you're already having sex with? Someone you're already impregnated? You think he's the father, not Sharptooth? Jessica said the cub is mixed breed. Sharptooth is also a cheetah. Sharptooth is a cheetah too. She didn't have a third lover, so Telema has to be the father. Working in his head. How do you know she didn't have a third lover or more? Marlowe shifted uncomfortably. I know her type. Or looked at him and debated pressing him. But he could smell how uncomfortable his wolf was. That leave Alcyon. Marlowe nodded, visibly calming. Telema seems to think he's responsible. He might have found out about the pregnancy. It would certainly anger him to find out she was pregnant with someone else's cub while contracted to have his. Depends on the contract, or pointed out before accessing the mating agency database. His investigator's ID gave him access, and he ran a search for Aiden in Alcyon's record. This day and age, mating records weren't needed to build families, but they did provide some protection by outlining the purpose of the relationship, expected behavior, and consequences if the contract was broken. Marlowe brought up the contract and read it. Nodded. The contract is for a cub. That puts Sharptooth at the top of the list. Marlot got the cheetah's number from the registry, and a quick conversation later they had a meeting. He's waiting for us for this afternoon. Trembor tail still. That's pretty quick. I get the feeling he's in a hurry to put this behind him. Lion nodded. Okay. So we leave in 3 hours. We should have plenty of time to make it. Anything else we can use to break someone away from the herd? And this concludes chapter 5 of A Wasteful Death. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you to know when the next chapter is going to be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the whole story as well as the others in the series, the other books in the series, it's available on all major retailer. Want to support me? That's on my Patreon. And if you want to listen to me do these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the notes. That I shall wish you a good day.